this is about you in a lot of ways. People who do some kind of meditative practice sort of routinely, pretty much of the time, 10, 20, 30 minutes a day, 45 on a good day. In other words, people like me, real world, okay, they actually have measurably thicker brains in certain key regions. So the number one region up here is called the insula. It's a part of the brain, and again, there are two of them, that is involved in what's called interoception, tuning into the internal state of your body, and as well as your deep feelings. No wonder. They're tuning into themselves. Probably a lot of what they're doing is practicing mindfulness of breathing. They're getting in touch. They're staying really present with what's going on. No wonder. They're using, and therefore they're building, much like a muscle, by analogy, literally. They're using it so they build it, the insula. Second, the second region is the frontal regions of the prefrontal cortex, the frontal areas, that are involved, again, in controlling attention. No surprise here as well. They're using attention, so they're getting more control over it, and they're strengthening its neural basis. The third region up at the top is somatosensory cortex. It's a part that basically they're tuning into their body. It's less relevant for our purposes. The point is that people who routinely practice something, in this particular case, mindfulness meditation, build up the neural substrates that are its basis. Normally we lose about 10,000 brain cells a day. That may sound horrible, but we were born with 1.1 trillion. And we also have several thousand a day born inside mainly the hippocampus, actually, and in what's called neurogenesis. So losing 10,000 a day isn't that big a deal, but the net bottom line is that a typical 80-year-old will have lost about 4% of brain mass. It's called cortical thinning with aging. It's a normal process. So in this study, there was a comparison between the meditators and the non-meditators. The meditators are the blue circles. The non-meditators are the red squares, age, matched, and so forth. This was not a longitudinal study. It was a cohort study with some good statistical controls. The people who are the red squares, the controls, experienced normal cortical thinning in these three regions of interest. Whereas the people who routinely meditated and worked that muscle, quote unquote, did not experience cortical thinning in that region. They're the blue circles with the line straight across. That has a lot of implications for an aging population. I had a birthday yesterday, and so, it's on my mind, and there's always a little more gray hair every year in the mirror. So anyway, use it or lose it, right? It applies to the brain as well as to other aspects of life. That takes us to a really important point, that for me is a major takeaway in this territory, that our experience really matters. It doesn't just matter moment to moment in terms of, subjective well-being, as Bob was saying earlier, how it feels to be me, but it also really matters in the lasting residues it leaves behind, woven into our very being.
Changing our interior environment through training the mind and heart and body in these practices can actually shift our levels of happiness. Richie Davidson, who is the principal investigator of the study, he says, happiness can be trained because the very structure of our brain can be modified. So what he's talking about here is neuroplasticity. Our repeated experiences shape our brain. Does this remind you of anything? Right? It's exactly what this monk told me. What we practice becomes stronger. Everything that we practice, every single moment matters. So these are brains from Harvard. I think that makes them a little more special. And basically, Sarah Lazar did this wonderful early research, and what she found is that meditators, the actual parts of their brain that have to do with attention, concentration, emotional intelligence, compassion, those parts of the brain actually get stronger, bigger. It's called cortical thickening. And that this thickening is correlated with practice. What we practice gets stronger. So the way I like to think of it is we have these super highways of habits. And they're just they're well-grooved pathways in our brain, right? They just, they're what we automatically do. And what mindfulness is helping us start to do is to kind of build, I think of it as digging a country road. You're clearing all the brambles in your brain. You're creating this new neural pathway that's I'm going to actually do it with compassion this time, or with a little more patience, or a little more presence. And so instead of going down that same superhighway of habit, we're shifting and we're going down a different pathway. And every single time that we do this, we're strengthening that pathway so that eventually that pathway becomes the habit.
Buddha Vajana institution. Learning, practicing, spreading only the words of the Tathāgata. A strong post or pillar is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. And how, Bhikkhus, is there restraint? Here, having seen a form with the eye, having heard a sound with the ear, having smelt an odor with the nose, having savored a taste with the tongue, having felt a tactile object with the body, having cognized a mental phenomenon with the mind. A bhikkhu is not intent upon a pleasing form and not repelled by a displeasing form. He dwells, having set up mindfulness of the body, with a measureless mind, and he understands as it really is that liberation of mind. Liberation by wisdom, wherein those evil unwholesome states cease without remainder. It is in such a way that there is restraint. Suppose, Bhikkhus, a man would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would bind them to a strong post or pillar. Then those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, "Let me enter an anthill, as above." The monkey would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a forest." Now when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would stand close to that post or pillar. They would sit down there. They would lie down there. So too, Bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu has developed and cultivated mindfulness direct to the body, the eye does not pull in the direction of agreeable forms, nor are disagreeable forms repulsive. The ear does not pull in the direction of agreeable sounds, nor are disagreeable sounds repulsive. The nose does not pull in the direction of agreeable odors, nor are disagreeable odors repulsive. The tongue does not pull in the direction of agreeable tastes, nor are disagreeable tastes repulsive. The body does not pull in the direction of agreeable tactile objects, nor are disagreeable tactile objects repulsive. The mind does not pull in the direction of agreeable mental phenomena, nor are disagreeable mental phenomena repulsive. It is in such a way that there is restraint. A strong post or pillar. This, Bhikkhus, is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. Therefore, Bhikkhus, you should train yourselves thus. We will develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body. Make it our vehicle. Make it our basis. Stabilize it. Exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourselves. Before Tathāgata enlightenment, generally dwelt in concentration by mindfulness of breathing dwelling. Bhikkhus. That bhikkhu gains at will, without trouble or difficulty. That concentration through the development and cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And what concentration is it through the development and cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? It is, bhikkhus, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing has been developed and cultivated, that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And how, bhikkhus, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing developed and cultivated so that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him. Just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he knows, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he knows, I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. He trains thus, tranquilizing the bodily formations, I will breathe in. He trains thus, tranquilizing the bodily formations, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing rapture, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing rapture, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing happiness, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing happiness, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mental formation, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mental formation, I will breathe out. He trains thus, tranquilizing the mental formation, I will breathe in. He trains thus, tranquilizing the mental formation, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Liberating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Liberating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Contemplating impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Contemplating impermanence, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Contemplating fading away, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Contemplating fading away, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Contemplating cessation, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Contemplating cessation, I will breathe out. He trains thus. Contemplating relinquishment, I will breathe in. He trains thus. Contemplating relinquishment, I will breathe out. It is, Bhikkhus, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing has been developed and cultivated in this way that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. I too, Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still a bodhisattva, not yet fully enlightened, generally dwelt in this dwelling. While I generally dwelt in this dwelling, neither my body nor my eyes became fatigued, and my mind, by not clinging, was liberated from the taints. Therefore, Bhikkhus, if a bhikkhu wishes, may neither my body nor my eyes become fatigued, and may my mind, by not clinging, be liberated from the taints. This same concentration by mindfulness of breathing should be closely attended to.